You're not free to make your own choices.
Sometimes you feel so...
You're just
trapped.
Hello everybody, welcome to the channel. Welcome back to the channel if you've already been here. This is one of a few videos I'm going to do, or several videos maybe, but certainly a few videos I'm going to do on Franz Kafka. So Kafka is one of those literary giants that it's so influential and such a major figure that he's become part of our language, because now we refer to some situations as Kafkaesque. Just like Orwellian is a part of our language now, Kafkaesque is now a part of our language. It's a very different thing, but it's also, Kafkaesque is also something that's been bandied about quite loosely as well. But there is a very definite reference to the themes and anxieties in Kafka's work. But I just want to say, I'm going to basically talk about this book very briefly in the context of the some of the big works that are in this book, and about him in general, just to start off with. But I will do some other ones where I want to talk in more detail about the trial, in more detail about Metamorphosis, and more detail possibly about the castle and a few other things. But I'm going to talk about this book because it's a very interesting book. But first off, let me tell you about Franz Kafka, in case you didn't know. So he was born in Prague in 1883, July 1883. And he was, his whole life, he was German speaking, and he came from a Jewish family. And he was the eldest of 6 children. He had 2 younger brothers who died in infancy, and he had 3 younger sisters, and all 3 of them either died in concentration camps in the 40s or in a Polish ghetto. So he's like the surviving member of this family that's had all this bad stuff happen to him as far as his siblings goes. And he had a really domineering father that's been described as a tyrant in his biographical stuff, and he spent his whole life dealing with the fact that he had this domineering father who died in 1931, but he still was dealing with it after that. He also suffered with some major illnesses as well. So he suffered from tuberculosis all his life, but he also had clinical depression. He had social anxiety. He was an insomniac, and he had constipation as well. He had all sorts of different problems. But he had this massive issue with his father that you can see in his writing. And ultimately, he didn't live for very long, and his work and his worldview was dominated by this new feeling that was kind of filtering through the West of this sort of existentialism. And he's been quoted as saying that humans were created by a god that was having a bad day. So he was so sometimes you see him described as a Jewish skeptic and sometimes as an atheist. And ultimately, he wasn't a devout Jew, and he had this very combative idea about life and God and power. And I think it comes a lot from his issue with his father, by the looks of it. A very interesting man, really, really interesting man. Sadly, he didn't live for very long, and he created this work. But what's another really weird thing is that he wrote Metamorphosis, so that's a huge part of his work, Metamorphosis. It's an amazing thing, which I want to talk about in another video in more detail. But he published that while he was alive. But most of his work has been published after his death by his friend, Max Brod, who he asked not to publish anything else and said, just burn all my manuscripts. But his friend, Max Brod, said, no, I'm not going to do that. and released all this material, including the trial. So the trial was published after he died, and another one that's like one of his most famous pieces of work, The Castle, which he didn't even finish. It finishes mid-sentence, so he didn't even finish The Castle. And if you think about those three major works, The Trial, Metamorphosis, and The Castle, The Trial, I think, is an absolute masterpiece. It's incredible. And that's why I want to do a special video on The Trial. I think it's just phenomenal. But the thing with The Trial, if you just had Metamorphosis, then you would have one idea of what Kafkaesque means. The Trial is a lot more detailed in its inescapable nightmare, and it's much more of a social nightmare. Metamorphosis is a biological nightmare, which is significant, but The Trial is a social nightmare, social political nightmare, and it's about bureaucracy. It's about the inability to battle against these rigid forms of power that make the powerless utterly helpless. So you've got this sort of helplessness, and you've got this sort of confusion, and you've got a main character, Joseph K, who literally doesn't understand what's going on, and is not, nothing's ever explained to him. And the whole thing with the trial is it's quite surreal, but it's got this power dynamic that makes it more than just surreal. If you look at Alice in Wonderland, that's really surreal, but it's just fun, and it's not really nightmarish. The problem with the trial is it's really threatening, and the power dynamic is nightmarish. It's not just weird, you know. It is definitely weird, but it's weird in a very political way. And the idea of the trial is that this is how Kafka's portraying man's position in society. So it's a really fascinating and fantastic piece of work. And Metamorphosis is all built around its inability to change the fact that somebody wakes up one morning as a bug, and there's no explanation for it. And the way that everyone around him reacts is really different but telling. Reveals a lot to the main character, but also as for the reader as well. And The Castle is full of comments about bureaucracy again, because it's about a surveyor trying to get to this castle, and it keeps getting blocked. And it's just about this inability to get to where they want to go and do what they want to do amongst this village, which is riddled with bureaucracy. So you can see that there's this consistency. So having said that, you've got this book. Well, I mean, I'll just give you some reason why I referenced this book, because the three pieces of work that I just talked about, The Trial, Metamorphosis, and The Castle, are all in this, The Essential Kafka. You can get them separately as well. And sometimes if you get like a version of The Trial that's just The Trial, then you can get really cool introductional notes with it as well, which expands on the themes of the book. This has come out as a new translation of some of his short stories, some of his incredibly short stories as well. Some of these are literally a paragraph, but this is called The Unhappiness of Being a Single Man, and it's a really interesting book. It does contain one of his most famous stories, or a couple of his really famous stories, but the Hunger Artist, A Hunger Artist, not The Hunger, A Hunger Artist, is really, really influential and important. And it does expand on this Kafkaesque idea of society, because it's about an artist that is basically starving themselves for their art, and nobody seems to give a toss. And no matter what they're doing for their art, it doesn't seem to be leaving much of an impression or having a big impact. And it's got that sort of existentialist attitude to art. And In the Penal Colony is in this as well, and that's a really another expansion on Kafkaesque ideas. The one that's called Poseidon is interesting as well, because normally his stories are about the ordinary man. And Poseidon is from the point of view of the famous Poseidon who runs the sea, and he's steeped in bureaucracy as well. So again, it's another thing that is another one of pushing this idea of Kafka's obsession with man's inability to break free of that stuff, but this is like a god being unable to break free of this stuff as well. So Poseidon's an interesting story as well, but they're very easy to read, this new translation of these stories, and some of them are a little bit too slight, I'd suggest. So Before the Law is literally like 2 pages, and it has a nice sort of point to make, but again, it's not particularly impactful. Same with The Bridge, it's literally just that, and you can see his ideas, but it doesn't really get very far. The Truth About Sancho Panza, that is literally that's it, and I think it does have an impact when it's so short that the point is lost a little bit. It's always not driven home enough. Again, the unhappiness of being a single man is just that. This does explore their ideas. Well, if you do like Kafka, I definitely recommend it. And it's got a nice translation of A Hunger Artist in it and in the Penal Colony. But some of them, just be aware that some of them you'll read it and go, oh, okay, and then want to move on to another one. But he's an amazing writer, and I particularly like Metamorphosis and The Trial. But that book is a really interesting addition to what you might already know by him. So The Unhappiness of Being a Single Man, newly translated. I'll tell you what, one thing I really liked in it was the introduction. I thought it was really cool. So an introduction by the translator, translator's preface. That was really cool. And I think, and I remember when I was reading it, he was trying to make a big point about how humorous Kafka's short stories are. And yeah, there's sometimes it's literally setting up a punchline. That is true. And there is this sort of light touch to them. But there is a light touch to some of the other nightmarish ones as well, because the incredulity of the absurdity in these characters' lives is what can sometimes be funny or sometimes be slightly humorous. So this is a little bit more punchline-y, as in you're not necessarily laughing or smiling at the absurdity, but you might be laughing at something he's written deliberately as something timed well to make you smile. So I don't know if you know what I mean, but humour's a rhythm. There's a rhythm to humour, and sometimes you can see that in this translation. So yeah, I think that's quite an interesting aspect to it as well, that the translator's written his preface that's arguing that it's important to see Kafka's writing as funny, or at least humorous. Yeah, slightly humorous. Funny could be a strong word. So yeah, let me know what you think of Kafka. I'm going to very soon, during the summer probably, I'll do my videos on The Trial and Metamorphosis. But thank you for watching. It's a very small video about just recommending this one because it is very good. But just keep in mind that I do personally think the longer ones, I mean, Metamorphosis is short, but The Trial is longer. Trial is just a masterpiece. So there we are. Thanks for watching. Stay curious, everybody.
Paint me a picture of what it's like to